A lack of friends indicates that a person might be someone who has not yet learned how to properly orient themselves in the world, psychologically, socially, or ethically. This isn't meant as condemnation, it's an invitation to self-reflection. Because friendship, genuine friendship, is not something that's handed to you. It's not a right. It's earned. It's cultivated through responsibility, reciprocity, and a willingness to engage in the difficult, often uncomfortable process of becoming someone worth knowing. Now, what does it mean to be someone worth knowing? It starts with competence. If you can't take care of yourself, your emotions, your words, your habits, how can anyone trust you to take care of anything else? If you're always consumed by chaos, by bitterness, by resentment, you're not someone people can rely on. And people, good people, seek out others who they can rely on. Friendship is predicated on trust. Trust that you won't use their vulnerability against them. Trust that when they need someone to stand up, you won't shrink into the shadows. A person with no friends might be someone who hasn't yet learned the importance of listening. Not just hearing, but listening. Most people think communication is about speaking, but the most valuable trait in a conversation is the capacity to shut up and actually hear what the other person is trying to say beneath their words. That's rare, and people gravitate toward those rare souls who can truly listen, who aren't waiting to talk, who aren't performing, but who are present. A person with no friends might also be someone who avoids responsibility, and responsibility is the cornerstone of all meaning. When you carry something heavy with grace, people see it, they respect it, they trust it, and they're drawn to it. But if you shirk that burden, if you whine, if you play the victim endlessly, eventually people turn away, not because they're cruel, but because they have their own burdens to carry, and they can't carry yours too if you won't shoulder any of the weight yourself. Of course, sometimes a person has no friends because they are in a season of transformation. Maybe they're cleaning up their life. Maybe they've walked away from destructive relationships. That's different. That's not failure. That's pruning. That's making space. But it must be followed by growth, by stepping forward into the world with courage, humility, and an open heart. So if you find yourself isolated, look inward before you blame the world. Ask, am I someone others can trust? Am I showing up with integrity? Am I listening? Am I contributing? Because friendship is a reflection of the kind of person you are, and when you become someone whose presence is a gift, not a demand, the world starts to open up to you. People appear, connections form, not because you begged for them, but because you became worthy of them. Friendship is not something that simply arrives at your doorstep because you want it or believe you deserve it. It has to be earned, like trust, like respect. It's a process, not a given. And the first step in that process is recognizing that relationships are predicated on mutual value, not in a transactional sense, but in the sense that both people in a friendship bring something of substance to the table, something real, something stable, something honest. If you want people in your life who are loyal, kind, and strong, you have to become a person who attracts those traits. That means developing character, not just personality. It means being dependable, telling the truth even when it's hard, showing up when it matters, and being the kind of person who is capable of carrying the weight of real connection. There's a reason why people naturally drift toward those who are solid. It's because life is full of chaos, uncertainty, and suffering, and no one wants to walk through that alongside someone who adds to the burden rather than helps carry it. If you're unreliable, always looking for attention, or perpetually lost in your own drama, people might sympathize with you at first, but over time they start to distance themselves. Not because they're bad people, but because deep down, everyone is looking for someone they can lean on when things fall apart. And if you're not that person, if you haven't done the work to become strong, to become honest, to become useful, then you'll find yourself alone. Being a friend isn't about being liked all the time. It's about being truthful, even when the truth is uncomfortable. It's about offering support without enabling weakness. It's about knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. These aren't traits people are born with. They're skills that are developed over time. And if you haven't taken the time to build those skills, to refine who you are, then the absence of friendships might not be a mystery, It might be a reflection of how others see you. Because people can sense whether you're genuine or performative. They can tell whether you're there for them or for what they can do for you, and they respond accordingly. In order to earn friendship, you have to move beyond surface-level charm. You have to develop substance. People are drawn to others who have wrestled with themselves, who have faced their flaws honestly, who have learned to act with integrity even when it's difficult. That kind of authenticity is rare, and when people find it, they hold on to it. If you haven't become that kind of person, or at least committed yourself to the path of becoming that kind of person, then it's unlikely that others will invest deeply in you. Because people don't invest in potential, they invest in character. And until you cultivate that, friendship will remain out of reach, not because the world is cruel, but because it is asking you to grow. People are naturally drawn to those who demonstrate competence and reliability. It's not about perfection, and it's not about status or charm. It's about being someone who can handle themselves and the responsibilities life throws at them. When others see that you can manage your own life with a sense of order and consistency, they begin to trust you, and trust is the foundation of any meaningful relationship. If you can't keep your word, if you collapse under pressure or avoid dealing with problems, then people will instinctively keep their distance, not out of malice, but because they don't want to tie their lives to someone who might pull them down rather than help lift them up. Competence signals strength. It shows that you've taken the time to develop the skills, discipline, and mindset necessary to navigate the world. That doesn't mean you have to be the best at everything. It means that in the areas that matter, your work, your word, your ability to regulate your emotions, you've put in the effort. People feel safer around someone who is steady. They feel more open with someone who's dependable, and they feel more inclined to invest in someone who clearly values self-respect and accountability. If you're always late, always apologizing for things you could control, or constantly shifting blame, people won't say it out loud, but they'll start to fade away. Reliability is even more important than raw talent or intelligence when it comes to building lasting relationships. You can be brilliant, you can be creative, but if you're unreliable, all of that potential is undermined. Think about it. Who wants to rely on someone who disappears when things get tough? Who wants a friend who's only there when it's easy? When people see that you're the type of person who follows through, who shows up when you say you will, who keeps your promises even when it's inconvenient, that earns real respect, and from that respect, friendship can grow. You also have to be emotionally competent. That means not losing control when you're upset, not manipulating others through guilt or anger, and not making your problems the center of every interaction. People admire those who can face difficulty without falling apart. They gravitate toward those who can hold it together, not just for themselves, but for the sake of others. If you can be the person who remains calm when things go sideways, who offers clarity when emotions run high, then you'll find yourself becoming a stabilizing force in people's lives. And people value that deeply, even if they never say it outright. Competence and reliability are like signals that tell the world, you can count on me. And when people pick up on that signal, they move toward it. They want to be near it. Because in a world that's uncertain and often chaotic, someone who's strong, capable, and consistent becomes a source of quiet strength. And that's the kind of person others want by their side, not just in moments of celebration, but especially in times of struggle. Listening is one of the most underrated and powerful skills a person can develop, especially when it comes to forming genuine, lasting friendships. Most people think that being interesting, witty, or entertaining is what draws others in. But more often, what people truly crave is to be heard, to feel that their words, emotions, and experiences are being received, not judged, not dismissed, but actually understood. And that kind of listening isn't passive. It's not just staying quiet while someone talks. It's an active effort. It requires attention, patience, and humility. When you really listen to someone, you're not just taking in the words. You're picking up on tone, body language, pauses, and emotions that might be buried underneath the surface. You're looking for what's not being said just as much as what is. And when a person feels that level of presence from you, they open up. They let down their guard. Because now they know they're not just talking to another set of ears. They're speaking to someone who actually cares. Someone who is trying to understand them in all their complexity. Right? Real listening is difficult, and that's why so few people do it well. Most of the time, when someone else is speaking, people are just waiting for their turn to respond. They're thinking about what they'll say next, how they'll insert their own story, how they can sound clever or correct. That kind of behavior turns conversations into performances and friendships into shallow exchanges. It's no wonder, then, that people drift apart or feel unseen. If every interaction becomes about winning attention or being right, then there's no room left for authentic connection. Being a good listener also means being willing to tolerate discomfort. Sometimes people say things that are difficult to hear. They talk about pain, regret, shame, or fear. And in those moments, the natural instinct is to interrupt, fix, advise, or even change the subject. But true listening requires you to sit with that discomfort and allow the other person's space to express what they need to say. You don't always have to have the answer. In fact, often the most helpful thing you can do is simply stay with them in that moment, fully present, offering nothing but your quiet attention. That alone can be more healing than 100 solutions. Listening also teaches you about yourself. When you learn to be quiet, you become aware of your own impulses, your need to interrupt, to impress, to control the narrative. Letting those go is part of becoming someone who can truly be with others in an honest, meaningful way. And as you do that, people start to sense it. They feel safe with you, they feel valued, and in return they begin to trust you with deeper parts of themselves. The people who are most remembered, who are most cherished, are not usually the loudest or most charismatic. They are often the ones who could sit with you, hear you, and make you feel, maybe for the first time, that your words actually mattered. Avoiding responsibility is one of the surest ways to push people away, often without even realizing it. Relationships of any kind, friendship, family, or romantic, are built on a silent understanding that both individuals are willing to carry their share of the emotional and practical load. When someone consistently refuses to take responsibility for their actions, their words, or their role in the situation, it creates an imbalance. And over time, that imbalance becomes unbearable. People don't want to be constantly managing the fallout from someone else's poor choices, especially when that person refuses to acknowledge their part in it. When you're always blaming others, playing the victim, or excusing your behavior with endless justifications, it sends a clear message. You are not someone who can be counted on. Life is difficult enough as it is. Everyone has problems. Everyone suffers. And while empathy is essential, people eventually lose patience with those who use their pain as an excuse to remain stagnant. It's not that others expect perfection, but they do expect effort. They expect you to own your mistakes, to learn from them, and to, even in small ways, to move forward with more intention and awareness than before. Taking responsibility doesn't mean shouldering the blame for everything. It means recognizing where your influence lies and acting with integrity in those areas. If you constantly miss appointments, fail to follow through on your word, or lash out when challenged, those around you will start to withdraw. Not because they don't care, but because they've learned over time that you won't change unless you decide to. Responsibility is attractive not just because it shows maturity, but because it creates safety. When people know that you are accountable for yourself, your actions, isolation isn't always a sign of failure. Sometimes it's part of a necessary and deeply personal transformation. There are moments in life when you step away from old social circles, not because you want to be alone, but because you're trying to become someone different, someone better. This period of solitude can feel painful and confusing, especially when you're used to defining yourself through the roles and relationships you've had. But growth requires space. It requires distance from the noise of others' opinions, the expectations you've absorbed, and the comfort of familiar but unhelpful patterns. In that space, you begin to see more clearly who you are and who you're not. This kind of isolation is not the same as being rejected or excluded. It's often a conscious, if difficult, decision to pull away from relationships that no longer align with your values. Maybe you've outgrown the need to impress others through shallow behavior. Maybe you've realized that the people you once called friends were only interested in the version of you that was broken or dependent. Maybe you've stopped playing the games that kept you included in groups that never really accepted you. These realizations hurt, but they also liberate. They clear the path for authenticity. And authenticity is the soil in which real connection grows. But transformation is not automatic just because you're alone. Solitude must be used wisely. It's easy to fall into bitterness, resentment, or self-pity when the phone doesn't ring or when no one checks in. But that silence can also be a mirror. It shows you what you still need to confront in yourself. Maybe you've been overly defensive. Maybe you've been passive-aggressive, unreliable, or quick to judge. These are hard truths, but they're the truths that set the foundation for real change. Once you begin to take ownership of your flaws and actively work to correct them, you start building a character that others naturally respect and trust. There is strength in emerging from isolation, not as someone who feels entitled to others' attention, but as someone who has refined themselves in private. People notice that. They may not understand what you've been through, but they'll see the difference in how you carry yourself, how you speak, how you listen. And the connections that come from that place are deeper, more durable, and far more meaningful than the ones formed through convenience or similarity alone. Transformation doesn't make you better than others. It simply makes you more aligned with who you are capable of becoming. And once you begin to live out that alignment, the right people will start to appear. Not all at once and not without effort, but steadily. They'll recognize something in you that feels solid, honest, and real. And you'll be ready, not because you were waiting, but because you were preparing.